The house of the possessed. I had to lock myself inside that house because it was stormy. In the middle of the mountain, in the middle of nowhere, it seemed like the only way to protect myself. I heard laughter in the distance outside. They say witches roam those mountains, but somehow, at that moment, I understood. I understood why they were laughing. I understood what I had gotten myself into. For a split second, I had the realization what was in there with me was worse than what awaited me outside. My story begins with a warning: listen to your grandmothers if you're fortunate enough to have them alive. There isn't a being in this world more concerned about your well-being. Sometimes mothers worry too much about teaching us lessons, preparing us for life. But grandmothers, all they want, all they pray for, is for us to be safe. They pray we never have to experience events that mark us forever, even if those experiences might teach us lessons that serve us for the rest of our lives. I say all this because what I'm about to tell you is a mixture of things I experienced firsthand and stories I was told. Together they bring to life what was the most terrifying, most horrible night of my existence. My grandmother's house sits in the village where my mother was born, where her entire family was born. My mother came to Mexico City to work, but everyone else stayed behind. I didn't meet them until my mother divorced my father when I was 10 years old. For some reason, he didn't want me to interact with that side of my family, to glimpse that part of my life. They welcomed me with a birthday party, and from then on, even though they were far away, they were the family that was always there. Unfortunately, my mother's family has the terrible luck of almost all dying too young. That once large family in the village grew smaller. I know there were others scattered around, but as the years passed, the only person I visited was my grandmother Carmen, especially when she began falling ill. My mother and I would take turns so that at least one of us would go there every weekend to stay with Abuela Carmen, as I called her. This happened on a Friday. Not just any Friday. I know it'll sound cliché, but this started on Friday the 13th. Friday, December 13th, 2013. I got off the bus that passed through the village. It's so small that no one else got off there. Then I took the path to my grandmother's house. Every time I went, I couldn't help but notice the changes. The stores where I once excitedly ran for candy as a child were fewer now. A convenience store that somehow survived there with the village's small population had devoured them all. My grandmother's house was almost at the edge of the village, up a street from which you could see everything, every light, every street lamp, every window in the place. A view I still remember and love. I found my grandmother outside, worried, looking toward the mountain, toward the trees, about 100 meters from her house, where the wilderness began. At first I thought she was watering her plants, but I quickly realized it was something different. She looked troubled. I asked what was happening, and as soon as she saw me, she hugged me. She told me that my Uncle Raphael had visited her and left her very worried. He had been there talking with her for a little while, checking on her, but then he lost his mind again. He started talking to himself, saying things that made no sense, as if speaking with someone else, as if answering someone who wasn't there. And then, as he often did, he ran away, but toward the mountain. You see, Uncle Raphael, my grandmother's nephew, my mother's youngest cousin, would go through phases like this. He'd disappear for weeks, go crazy, get lost. Sometimes he'd go to the mountain, sometimes he'd appear in another village. They say once another uncle found him near the border and brought him all the way back. My mother says it's because he took too many drugs as a teenager. My grandmother believed his mother had a debt, one of those debts to something greater, and they collected it with her son's sanity. Abuela Carmen believed strongly in witches, but not in the way most people might imagine real witches. In that area there used to be many of those women who would do trabajos for you, who would help with health issues, love matters, fortune. There was a solution for everything, an answer for every ailment, but also a debt that sometimes wasn't collected immediately, but that never remained unpaid. Abuela Carmen didn't mess with them at all. And it was more a thing of other times from before because since I've been visiting the place, I never saw anything despite people saying the witches had gone to the mountain because they had deceived the town's mayor once and were being hunted. Nothing, I never saw anything. And my grandmother always believed that Uncle Raphael's temporary madness was there doing witchcraft. We entered her house. She was going to give me something to eat because I arrived tired. But I could see my grandmother, my abuela Carmen, was very worried. The tension never left her eyes, and I saw how she kept glancing at the window that faced the mountain. I hurried to finish eating and told her I'd go take a look for Uncle Raphael, that maybe he was still nearby, dazed among the trees. She told me no and pointed to the distant clouds. A storm would arrive soon. I replied that was precisely why it was important to find my uncle quickly so he wouldn't get stuck up there when the weather turned. I was concerned about him, of course, but mostly about Abuela Carmen because she wasn't in a condition to be worried like this because every concern made her worse. If I could look for him, I would. Besides, I had wandered so much on that mountain with my cousins that I knew the area well. I wasn't going to venture where I couldn't orient myself. In the end, I convinced my grandmother. She told me my uncle was wearing a green sweater, one she had knitted herself, and please not to stay on the mountain after midnight. I told her not to worry. It was barely 8 p.m. At that moment, I didn't think it would take me more than an hour to find Uncle Raphael. Before I left, she gave me one more warning, one that felt somehow more serious, just before giving me her blessing. No matter what happens, mijo, even if the storm catches, you don't stay in the Morales brothers' house. It's abandoned, but it's not empty. I knew the story. The Morales brothers were two old men twins who always lived alone in a small house on the hillside in a flat clearing up there that they used to farm everything. That's how they lived, and their house stood right in the center of that clearing. I remember seeing it once when I was a child, but I don't know how I got there. I didn't expect to have to see it that night. I entered the path. I knew the one that made me feel safe, and although the wind was starting to blow hard, I kept calling out to Uncle Raphael. They say sometimes the wind carries voices and screams even further, so I trusted that the wind would carry my voice and help me find my uncle. As soon as I entered among the trees, the sounds of the village disappeared. I already knew that strange silence of the mountain. Occasionally I'd hear dogs barking in the distance, but nothing more, as if only they had permission to be heard. I'd been climbing for almost half an hour when I heard voices talking calmly. I approached where they were and saw two figures sitting next to an extinguished bonfire. It was already dark, and I didn't want to illuminate them with my phone's flashlight, so I called out to those silhouettes. "Good evening. Have you seen Raphael pass by here?" I asked that way so they'd know I was from the village, that we all knew each other there, because I still suspected they might be criminals hiding. In the darkness, they looked like two black silhouettes where I could only see the whites of their eyes. They turned to look at me. "Raphael. Nothing passes through here at this hour," said one. "Nothing passes through here at this hour," the other immediately repeated. "He's my uncle. He's not well. He loses his mind and gets lost. And we're afraid something might happen to him up here. He's Carmen's nephew. She's my grandmother." I told them. "I think we know Carmen. Yes, we know Carmen. Yes, we know Carmen," one said, and then the other two overlapping their responses. And that seemed strange to me. The village is tiny, very tiny. And perhaps because she was among the oldest, I knew that everyone there knew who my grandmother was. But no one has passed through here? Or we didn't see them pass? We didn't see them pass? We didn't see them, but keep climbing to find him quickly because the storm is coming. Because around here one shouldn't wander on nights like this. One shouldn't wander on nights like this outside. No one shouldn't wander. I thanked them, trying to be very polite, as if that would keep them from doing anything to me if they were bad people. One of them, the one who spoke first, stood up. He came a little closer to me. It was so dark there among the trees that even a meter away from me I couldn't make out his form. I couldn't see any detail about him. I couldn't see how he was dressed or what his face looked like. He was a black shape near me from which I could only see the eyes. "You know he doesn't come alone, boy?" he asked me in a very low voice so only I would hear. "I know you're worried and need to find your relative, but tonight is not a good night to keep climbing." He said this, and the silhouette sat back down with the other one next to the extinguished bonfire. As if I wasn't there, they continued their conversation. I said goodbye, telling them I'd see them on my way back, and as soon as I walked a few steps, I stopped hearing them. I was very concerned. I had made a commitment to Abuela Carmen. I was very afraid to continue, but I was more afraid to go back. To have to tell her I found nothing, that I didn't dare to keep climbing because it was too dark. Who in their right mind would dare to tell her something like that? I don't know how much more I climbed, but to the right of the path I was on, I saw a short path that led to a clearing. There, without the shade of the trees, I could see a little beyond the light of my lamp. I saw an overgrown field full of weeds. In the middle of it stood a small adobe house, barely standing the Morales brothers' house. Also there in the trees above me, I could see that the storm was approaching, and I thought about what Abuela Carmen said in her warning, but the little house didn't look like a place I'd even want to approach. I kept climbing, kept walking for a while longer. At times I would turn off the flashlight because the last thing I wanted was for the battery to run out. I couldn't be left in the dark up there, so I had to start saving energy. I turned off the lamp for long periods while I kept shouting. My eyes gradually adjusted to the darkness, and suddenly, I'm not lying, I felt like I could see better when it was off. I continued walking, climbing up the path that no longer seemed so familiar that I no longer recognized. I started to lose confidence, turning the light on, walking a bit, looking at the ground in front of me, illuminating around to see if I could spot Uncle Raphael crouching somewhere, turning it off, looking into the distance all around in pure darkness. Suddenly, when I turned it off, I saw something ahead in the darkness, but very clearly a woman standing in the middle of the path where I was heading. The wind was blowing and it was starting to rain. The woman was holding her shawl with one hand near her throat, holding it. She wouldn't let me see her face. Even at that distance in such darkness, it would have been impossible anyway. I tried. I wanted to say good evening, but I couldn't. Have you ever felt danger up close, the kind that isn't so obvious, that hides in normality, but something tells you not to trust someone? That danger you feel between your stomach and chest that simply tells you to get away from there? I felt something like that, something that wouldn't let me speak to her. And I started to remember Abuela Carmen's fears, the stories I had heard about witches who had gone to hide in the mountain. The only thing I was sure of was that this short figure was not my Uncle Raphael. So without saying anything to her, I turned around and started to descend. I looked back to see if she was still visible, but I could see the silhouette closer. She was running. I turned off my flashlight and started running downhill in complete darkness. I couldn't see the ground. Nothing, absolutely nothing, but I kept running, letting my knees fall forward, propelled by the slope that was getting steeper. The woman behind me was following closely, running at the same speed as me. I knew that if I was going to escape, I had to take a risk, run as fast as I could. I thought I could reach the extinguished bonfire where those people who had warned me were, but at the same time I felt I wouldn't make it. I had to think quickly. Suddenly, I felt something on my jaw, in my mouth, in my nose that started to burn, stabbing deep into my head. I felt mud entering my mouth and eyes. I had fallen flat on my face. I don't know how much more I rolled, but the first thing I did was get up just to hear something running through the undergrowth, something that I could swear was laughing. "Is that what you wanted to scare me so I'd break my face, right?" I shouted into the darkness, angry, somehow hoping that was all it was, like asking God that they just wanted to scare me, hoping they would let me go and continue down. The storm had fully arrived. I tried to recover, to keep descending as best I could, but water was starting to run down the path. I looked back into the darkness. I couldn't see her, but I felt something was following me. Now, among the trees, the path was almost disappearing. It seemed impossible to follow. And that's when to the left there was the field, and in the middle of it, the little house. Abuela Carmen's warning remained very present in my mind, but so did my survival instinct, which told me I needed to take cover to find a place where I could wait for the storm to pass. That lightning hadn't struck far from me. The house was the only shelter nearby from the storm and from whatever was following me. I entered the field and crossed it as quickly as the overgrown weeds allowed in what was once a field where everything was planted, where everything grew. In the middle of the field, a few meters before reaching the house, I turned again toward the trees, toward that absolute darkness. I don't know if it was the storm hitting my eyes, making me close them at times, but I thought I saw with the lightning's light something in the treetops where I had come from, where I had exited. I thought I saw figures, women in black up there on the thinnest branches that shouldn't support them. I could distinguish at least 3. I ran to the little house and knocked. It smelled of pure earth of abandonment. I opened the door. It was obvious no one was there, so I went in. There were a couple of leaks, but it was mostly dry. I could wait there until the storm passed. I remembered the story of that place because, remember, I told you this isn't only about what I experienced, but also about the stories I've heard. It was something widely known in the village from many years ago. The whole place had been filled with police, not the rural ones we were used to, but those from the city, those who dressed in civilian clothes. They were looking for something for someone house by house. A woman who wasn't from there, whom no one recognized when they showed the photo. Among them were 3 who seemed friendly, but who at times were more aggressive than the others. At first, the villagers thought they were the bosses. Later, they would know the truth. Those 3, the most desperate to find her, weren't police. They were priests. The girl they were looking for had escaped or had been helped to escape from Mexico City. They said she was a woman possessed by the devil who had been locked up in a convent for months while they waited for doctors, fathers, bishops, and cardinals to come see her. They were waiting for authorization from the Vatican to perform an exorcism. But when they finally did, when they gave the green light for the ritual, someone let her go. Someone opened the door to her room and to all the one she needed to exit the convent. How did they know she was in the village? I don't know. Not much was known about that, only that they searched for days and then disappeared from there. But no one in the village told them there was one more house to search. One that wasn't precisely in the village, but up there on the mountain in the middle of a field, for planting the house of the twins of the Morales brothers. It's not known if someone asked them to hide her or if she arrived there asking for help, but no one remembered them. People who went up for firewood or to hunt occasionally said they heard screams coming from inside. Screams of a man, of a woman, someone cursing very aggressively. They also said that the brothers had come down one afternoon to the village to buy milk, eggs, and cleaning supplies. That seemed strange to the store owner because they had their own animals up there, chickens, 2 goats. Normally, they only came down to the village to sell an animal or to exchange goods. A few weeks passed and the voices stopped, but people also stopped seeing the twins working in their field. Fruits ready to be harvested were left to rot. The chickens disappeared. One of the goats wandered down to the village hungry and thirsty. When the villagers climbed up to check, they say they found a horrible image. The woman was still there up there. The brothers were not. When the police were called, the strangers appeared again. The priests also went up at night, and by the time dawn came, they had taken everything away. And I always thought that was folklore legends, an interesting explanation for the death of 2 old men who died of old age, and nothing more, just to make it all more lyrical, more beautiful to tell. But at that moment there inside, I couldn't help but imagine it was all true, that a possessed woman had once been kept here. I heard laughter in the distance outside from the direction of the forest. Suddenly I understood why they were laughing. I had voluntarily walked into the trap. If the stories were true, if my grandmother was right, then what was in the house with me was worse than what was outside. Inside the house there were two rooms, a large one where I was standing, and a smaller one that I figured was the bedroom. The bedroom door was closed, but if I listened carefully beyond the sound of the storm, I could hear someone in there. Abandoned, but not empty. Abuela Carmen's words echoed in my head. I tried to open the bedroom door, a heavy wooden door almost falling off its rusted hinges. There was no one inside, but there was a strange, unpleasant smell coming from there. There was a candle on the floor with the image of a saint that appeared to have been scraped off as if someone had deliberately erased it. Fortunately, I had a lighter since I still smoked back then. I lit the candle and found one cigarette that had stayed dry despite my fall. It tasted like glory. Some time passed when I heard something. It sounded like something scratching the wall. I tried to pay attention to locate it. It seemed to come from the wall behind me, and then it moved. I realized that something was scratching around the house outside. I heard it clearly when it passed by the window, scratching glass instead of adobe, but nothing could be seen. I could only keep listening to it. My stomach hurt badly from fear. I felt it squeezing me inside, as if it were filling me, as if I had to throw my guts out, as if I had to extract them, but there was nothing with which to do it. There were some things left behind, rusty kitchen utensils lying around. I would have to find something. I started moving them. My belly was filling up, squeezing me from inside. I had to get it out. It was desperate. I searched without caring how dirty everything was, what I might find. And finally, I found a small folding knife. With that, it would be enough to open my belly and the gut that was bothering me. I took off my shirt, felt all over my belly, and found it. It was up there before the ribs started. That's where I felt the worst pressure. If I cut that intestine, it would surely bring relief. There was nothing to rinse the knife with, but I hoped to make a clean cut just enough to allow me to put my fingers inside the flesh and pull. I placed the folded knife right on the spot and gave it a slash. As soon as I felt the first stab, I managed to regret it to wake up. What the hell was I doing? How the hell had I thought about harming myself in that way? Why was I thinking about it as something normal? What was happening to me? What was in that house? I heard someone laughing inside the empty room. I headed for the door, but out there in the field at the entrance to the trees on the path where I had arrived, there was something. I don't know if it was the same one, but I saw a woman in black holding her shawl in the same place so the storm wouldn't take it. With her other hand, she was motioning for me to come to approach. What the hell was I supposed to do? What would you have done? The bedroom door creaked as if it were moving, but when I turned around, I saw it still slightly ajar just as before. I looked outside again and saw that the woman had walked toward the trees, disappearing from my sight. And then from among the tall weeds grown in the planting field surrounding the house, two more black figures appeared. They ran behind the woman. What if they were waiting for me? What if it was a trap and they were waiting for me to come out? Fortunately, I hadn't dared to do so. I sat down near the entrance with my hand on the doorknob. I would stay inside, but if something came out of that room, if the candle went out and left me in darkness, I would run out. I would deal with whatever was there in the forest. I leaned back. I was very tired. I closed my eyes. I opened my eyes. Without realizing it, I had already stood up. I heard something coming from the bedroom, as if someone were eating something. The door remained ajar, and I approached. I could see something in there. The candlelight filtered through and allowed me to see that horrifying scene. There was a woman. She wore a necklace that appeared to be made of bones. She was sitting on a mass of flesh and blood on what seemed to have been two bodies. She had blood flowing from her mouth, white eyes, both arms extended to the sides, one down and one up, like a figure I remembered having seen drawn like a demonic figure. She wasn't looking at me, but it wasn't necessary. With those white eyes toward the wall, she was piercing my soul. I could feel it. I turned to run away. It didn't matter anymore. But at the door, I was sitting asleep. It was as if, in that moment I realized that I had detached from my body. I opened my eyes. Still sitting at the door of the little house, I heard the sounds in the bedroom. The bedroom door was still ajar, but I didn't dare look in again. Whatever I had just seen, however I had seen it, was enough. I left the house and started walking through the field of tall grass when I heard something moving among them, and then a voice, "Run." I obeyed the voice that sounded very much like Uncle Raphael's, but I didn't think about it. I ran. I ran because it must have been around 4 in the morning, but I could see enough to find the path down, or maybe dawn was coming early. Oh God, somehow gave me the strength, the ability to see where I was running. I quickly found the place with the extinguished bonfire without the figures around, but I knew I was going in the right direction. I arrived home shortly before dawn. It was no longer raining, but my grandmother was praying very tired. She hadn't been able to sleep for a moment while waiting for my return. She told me she couldn't lose me, not me. And she made me swear I would never go up to the mountain alone again. I said yes, that I promised, and I cried for everything for her, for the fear, for what I had just seen, because I was tired and everything hurt, my soul hurt, and because I hadn't been able to return with Uncle Raphael. And I fell asleep. I slept deeply and woke up around 2 p.m. When my grandmother went to the market, I went to look for 2 acquaintances from the village who still remained. I asked them to accompany me up to the Morales brothers' house. I needed to see it. I needed to go back to see if my uncle was there. As we climbed, they told me everything they knew about that place, about that house. It was said that they found something horrible up there when the police went up to look for the woman, but no one knew if it was true what had been what they saw, only that it nearly drove mad the poor souls who witnessed it. We went up and the house was empty. I entered. There were no signs of anything, just my consumed candle. I had truly been there that night. I don't know why, but they asked us to leave after a few minutes of arriving, and obviously I listened to them. I no longer wanted to spend another moment there. When we were leaving, one of my friends noticed something. At first he thought it was a person among the branches, and we got scared, but then we saw clearly a scarecrow that had been left small as the weeds had grown around it. They had surpassed it to the point of almost hiding it. It was wearing a green sweater. I thought of my Uncle Raphael, but that sweater was very worn, dirty, torn, covered in dirt, as if it had been there for a long time, for years. Nothing more was ever heard of my Uncle Raphael. He didn't return from that crisis. My Abuela Carmen died shortly after from that illness that made us go to take care of her. Obviously, I haven't returned since then to that place. It must be even more abandoned now, more solitary. I have nothing waiting for me there except, perhaps in some way, that house that still speaks to me, but from far away I feel I can silence that voice, that I can ignore it. I am at peace, even though something is still there waiting for someone to take it with them, to extract it, to free it. If that happens, I only hope that what's there has forgotten about me, or that it never manages to reach me. But I shouldn't be so optimistic. 3 weeks after telling this story, I began to feel a strange pain in my belly just below the ribs. Last night when I woke up at 3 a.m., I swear I heard scratching sounds from outside my bedroom window, even though I live on the 23rd floor of an apartment building. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see a dark figure behind me with white eyes and a smile that stretches from ear to ear. Perhaps they have found me. Perhaps no one truly escapes that house. Have you ever encountered a place that felt abandoned but not empty, or heard local legends about possessed people in your area? Share your experiences in the comments below. And remember, some warnings from our elders are worth heeding, no matter how superstitious they might seem.